This is Dan. I'll make a motion to approve the minute, approve the agenda.
And this is Katie. I'll second.
Great. All in favor? Aye, or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Oh, okay. Yeah. So Barbara also noted that this is being recorded for the open meeting laws or regulations rules as just kind of thing to note. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes from the May 29th meeting? Anybody not received those that wants a copy? All right. At which point, anyone have any changes to those minutes? Someone would like to make a motion to approve?
What would really help me?
This is very minor, but my name is spelled with a K-A-T-Y instead of I-E. I don't know that matters, but if it does.
Katie,
How many
I
years
have
has
you, sorry, council, I have you spelled correctly. Where is it later down, like with a motion or something? I guess we can just look through and find it.
There's several spots with motions.
Okay. Okay, got it. Thanks.
Would anyone like to make a motion on the minutes? Am I allowed to make motions on things? No one
I'll
else
make a
does. No one else does that?
Approve the minutes. This is Dan.
Great. All in favor? Aye or raise hand.
Aye.
Who seconded the motion? Did you?
We can say that I moved and Dan seconded.
Yeah, we can do that. I missed the first move.
Anyone opposed to the approval of the minutes with changes to correct Katie's name? Dane? Great. That moves.
Aaron,
on
I need
to
to abstain.
Oh, okay.
I was abstaining as I wasn't here. Does that mean?
We may want, if you folks don't mind muting yourselves.
I don't know if anybody else hears the clicking noise. I don't know what that is. Great. All right. So, any public comment for the meeting? Usually at the end.
I don't know if we should have Joanne as our, Joanne, you're here as public, correct? Maybe Joanne could introduce herself. Oh, and Rob's here too, and Frank's here too, I guess. So I don't know how we normally would handle all this. So much public today, it's exciting. Oh, Joanne, you're still
Joanne,
muted.
you're muted.
There we go. Okay, I'm here for the Lake Basin Environmental Alliance. I'm on the board of that alliance. It's a new group for Lake Basin, and I was asked by our chair if I would join the meeting and report back to our group. Do you want more?
I think that's perfect. And yeah, should we have Rob and Frank introduce themselves too so that members know?
Yeah, I'm trying to get back on.
Oh yeah, I can go. I'm the executive director of Merck Forest and Farmland Center in Rupert. I am still receiving invites as a council member, so I was trying to attend in that capacity. But if I am unnecessary, I do not need to be here.
You are a council member, so it's great to see you.
Okay, perfect.
That's why you weren't, sorry, I didn't mean to say you as public. There was Rob Mealy here as well.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, Rob Terry.
Apologies.
We're super happy to see you today.
Super glad to be here.
Nice.
I'm Frank Piasecki from Fitzgerald Environmental Associates. We are the folks working on the Lake Basin Watershed Action Plan.
Awesome. Thanks,
And
Frank.
this is Jan Jones. Can you hear me now?
Oh, hi, Jan. That's you on the phone. Okay.
Yeah, sorry. This is Jan Jones. I'm a Hubbardton resident, also on the Lake Basin Environmental Alliance. And I had a question about the LWAP, which I could save for when we get to that point, if there's a chance to ask then.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
And I see Rob in the list here, but I can't see everybody at once. So Rob is with the Lake Basin Association, and the LBA holds the contract for the LWAP, which we're talking about in two agenda items. I think we're okay on that one, Erin.
Okay, sweet. So hitting the early stage fund budget increase.
Yes. So the whole idea for the early stage project fund was to have a really quick and easy way to get some information, a couple hours of field work, a couple hours of desktop work from a consultant to help figure out which direction projects should go, if they should come into our fund or if they should go to a different funding source. And so we were looking for a watershed size to the drainage issue, phosphorus potential reduction estimate, a general cost idea, and what type of project might go in this space. So we've had now 5 of those projects go out to bid. 3 different consultants worked on that data for us. We have another 4 that are getting ready to go out for RFP. But each of the consultants that came back with the information did an awesome job. We got really, really good deliverables from them, sort of over and above what we asked for, but they also came back higher than the price that we had sort of capped those funds at. So we had capped the project development fund at $1,500 per project. And maybe I sort of naively thought that we could just sort of write a check for $1,500. I knew that was a little bit low, so assumed everyone would spend all their dollars. They would just give me an invoice, $1,500, one project. Here's your data. But that isn't the way the invoicing has gone at the Regional Planning Commission. A lot of those groups had to update invoices multiple times. They already were overpriced, sort of trying to do us a favor. So it felt like if we're basically paying them at this capped amount, but we're asking them to turn in all their hours and miles and everything in an expense report, we probably should just pay them what it costs to actually do that work. So when we originally had this program approved, part of the program was that we capped each project at $1,500. So we wanted to come back to the BWQ and ask if it's okay if we just put these out to bid for actual hours and mileage, and then base our contract amounts on the bids we get back, and see if that was okay with you guys. It'll mean a few less projects, but I also think we were really stretching these consultants kind of thin, and in some cases, in fact, we'll hear about one of these projects later where the consultant was over twice the, he billed to himself over twice the amount that we actually could pay him.
Right. Yeah, I think you're referring to watershed consulting.
Yeah, and maybe that's part of this. That might be
that would
part of this bullet also. So maybe Barbara, if you want to go into that detail, and then we can talk about both of these.
I think all of our subcontractors went over. We heard from Watershed And they had 2 projects, so 1,500 times 2 for 3,000, and they actually spent $6,126 on this. So just an example of we're getting the good work, but we underestimated how much it would cost, and the flat sum doesn't seem to be working. So we're looking at time and materials now. If the council is amenable to that.
Would you still want to put a cap on it?
It's funny, we talked about that and we thought we would ask you that question with the council.
Yeah, because if I see a contract came to me as a time and materials without any sort of upper limit, I'd be concerned of somebody going, not necessarily above and beyond the call, but putting in more effort than expected, and then suddenly, instead of being at a $1,500 level or 2,000 or 25, being at a 45 or 6, and then just by finding ourselves in the spot where we're spending more money than we anticipated.
So if we use this example, I mean, we could double it. Use the watershed example.
What have some of the other overages been at?
Well, they didn't let us know exactly what the number was. They just billed us, they just invoiced us for the 1,500 or whatever it was.
So Hillary, you had said something about bidding the projects out instead.
Well, we put them out to bid, but we had like a price cap, a budget per project. So in this case, we would put them out to bid either with a different cap that you guys decide would be appropriate, or with no cap, but then we would just compare. Price would be one of the things we'd be looking at when we compared. I don't see these, these aren't full conceptual designs. These are just kind of quick and dirty, figure out what to do with this project. Like usually then they come back to the BWQ for a conceptual design or go to whatever grant source is appropriate. So, sorry, I'm seeing Zapata's texting about the different project types. And the project types were fairly similar. We had one stormwater project and the rest were gullies and stream restorations, and the projects we've been kind of talking about, Zapata with DEC.
I think I'd be more comfortable increasing it to a fixed amount. It's a little higher than the 1,500 than just going with the time and materials. I think we'd be, it's too vague.
Could I ask a question? Because on this?
Yeah, go ahead.
Because I'm not sure what you're talking about, but I'm thinking I was with an organization a community organization that would put out like an RFP to, like it would be like a certain amount of money to everybody to submit a grant. Is this what we're talking about? And so not everybody might submit, like you might have 9 projects, but in the end, after, is it just part of the expense of trying to give something up front to people to put out a proposal?
No, it's actually to have the work done. So this is they're coming in with their price to do the work of coming up with these phosphorus reduction estimates for us.
Okay. Yeah. So it actually is the amount to do the whole grant.
Right. It's like it's a step in project development in order to help us figure out where this project is going, and kind of, because now our formulas, this funding we're talking about right now today is so tied to phosphorus reduction at a certain cost, like there's a cap. So we need to figure out if projects fit into this bucket or not. And so that's where this was really helpful for new projects that hadn't had a consultant involved, to try and get some of that data quickly so we can move it forward.
And just a reminder of we send out these proposals to pre-qualified subcontractors. So we already know that they can do the work. We've already gone through that process with them. And we'll, we have been working with them and we have every intention, and there's no reason why we wouldn't continue working with them and getting good work back.
So, well, Mike Kozlow was the first one with his hand up. Mike?
So to me, it sounds like you're setting yourself up for an administrative nightmare of having to do the proposals for every $1,500 to $3,000 project. Have you considered just hiring one firm to do all this work, and then you've got an approved rate that you can charge them, or that they can charge you?
We hadn't, and part of the reason for that, Mike, was, for example, we had a new firm we'd never worked with. So they did one of the projects and we got to know all of them and how they work. And then the other piece is that we had a couple of these go out to bid, and the only people who bid on them were the people who had come to do that initial work. Like, having those people already tied to the project discouraged other people from bidding on it. So in terms of getting more people involved and working with more consultants, it might be nice to have them out for different folks working on them, and for us to get to know these consultants also. But I take your point. It makes sense. And we could batch them that way sometimes. Like, the next 4 could all go to one, they could all be in one RFP.
Okay. That's a reasonable answer. And how many of these projects have converted into actual Quist projects that we're going to follow through on?
So we're going to talk about that a little bit later too, because we had a lot of gullies in the first group and a lot of opportunity that's on hold indefinitely right now, for various reasons, mostly originating with DEC and the way this program works. So we have 2 of them. 2 of the 5 that we put out for RFP are moving ahead. Hopefully no problems. And there's another 4 that are on hold. One project turned into 2, so we had 5 turned into 6.
All right, thank you.
Shane?
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. Thanks. I'm trying to wrap my head around this. Dan and Mike, you both make good points, and get me thinking about different options. I wonder, Dan, in your proposal of just eliminating the cap, I mean, do we, or increasing the cap, I think is what you said, correct? Like, yeah, so how do we know we don't just bump up against that cap at some point, right? And that leads me to wonder, how well, I mean, I know you can understand a scope of work really well, and still you're going to get lots of different ranges of you're going to get a lot of range in your budget, your proposed budgets and your bids. But I just wonder if there's any way to understand the scopes of work a little bit better, so we understand what we should be expecting for budgets in the bids. And then just thinking more broadly, like, this is all really analogous to the evolution that DEC went through, I believe, like in that, they started funding projects, and then they eventually realized that they needed to start funding project development. And that seems to me like to be where we are, where we're understanding we need to fund project development. And maybe I'm missing a lot, because my head hasn't been in this at all, but I just throw out the thought, like, why isn't this just a regular activity that people, that we can fund? And if I remember correctly, part of it is that there are no real project developers at this point. I'm not even sure if that's correct, but I believe that that's correct. So yeah, Hillary, I don't know if you could just explain things, and like with just thinking about the analogy of the DEC funding programs and how they fund the project development phase, and if that is actually what this is that we're talking about.
So that is similar to what this is. And the reason that we have this bucket set aside is that we need your approval to spend funding. So the BWQ approved $30,000 for the consultants. And now we can, because the QUISP is in charge of procurement, we can procure for these individual projects. Like we have authority from you guys now for this one pot of funds to put out RFPs and write contracts and oversee that work. It's a QUISP funded sort of activity now. And so since we came originally to you for authority, we wanted to come back now that we think that it would be best for everybody involved if we raise the cap. I think that's what I assume we might actually do, but we could raise it or we could not have a cap. But the idea was to do as many projects as possible efficiently, just so we could get to the next, just so we could get through the project development into conceptual design.
And again, this is without any project development. If I remember correctly, this is like the municipalities that don't have staff to develop these projects. So the QUISP is doing that work.
Exactly. This is for projects that haven't already, like they weren't discovered in a stormwater master plan or a geomorphic assessment. Like they're coming to us from landowners, from towns, from, they haven't already been vetted.
Are we able to reach back out to the consultants that went over and ask where those overages came from? Whether that's just, was that more hours spent, for what reason, or was it more travel time, or was it more, and just kind of figure into, because doubling the expectation when it was laid out in an RFP and they said that they could do it for that amount, that's a lot to go over twice. And I don't know if that's just for budgeting or if that's like actual expenses and this really deserved to be twice as much.
Right. It's hard too, because we were sort of like, well, just send us an email back. Like we need a map of the watershed area, of the drainage, of the issue, and an email with your estimates. And they sent back these really awesome reports, which now we're actually using pretty intensively because of something we're going to talk about later. In fact, we should keep our eye on the clock because we actually have quite a bit to get to today. Some even more detailed than this topic. So you'll see some of the results of this work in a second and why actually having these kind of detailed reports back to us is important. But yeah, they did go over and above. And I think if we didn't pay them, they would understand they signed a contract for X amount of dollars. And sometimes that's the way it goes. But I think regardless of whether we pay them or not, it just seemed like everybody was going over and they were doing it as a kind of a favor. And it might be better if we had a little more funding so they don't feel like, so like every one of the rest of these projects isn't someone kind of doing us a favor. We might burn through our social capital here.
Kate, you had a comment, question?
Yeah, I think you guys sort of spoke to it. My question is really just, if we ask for a quick and dirty estimate and they went over and above, which is nice, but like I guess my question was, do we need that level of detail? So I think Hillary, you just kind of spoke to that in your answer. I guess though I would ask, like, do we need that level of detail every time? And is there a way to parse out which projects need that greater detail and which projects just need like a quick map and a quick estimate? It's not that I'm opposed to paying people, like a fair amount, but also if we really have no idea if these projects will go anywhere and we want to get more through the system, trying to balance that. But
Yeah, because kind of the original intent was like almost a fact finding. Is this good? Is this not good? Like then the detail would come with like the conceptual kind of proposal level stuff that would follow up
Right.
from that. Yes, no.
Right. And yeah, so I don't know, do we need like, this is a very maybe not helpful question, but like, do we need like stage 1, which is like even before what you guys just did? Do we need like the really quick like yes, no? And then what you just spent $3,000 on is the like, here's our estimate, and then it goes to conceptual? I mean, I don't know how we'd parse that out, but would that be helpful instead of just raising the cap for all of them? maybe not.
Yeah. No, I don't know. It's tough because like I do agree with Dan. Like if we raise it to 3,000, is it just going to be that then next time where they're still coming in over and they're providing beautiful things that we want to use, which is great, but now they're actually spending 4,500 and we need to pay them more and more and more. And like, are we just kicking the can without necessarily addressing why?
So it sounds like you'd like the staff maybe to give you more of background why.
A little bit, yeah. I mean, that's my personal preference. If we need to make a kind of decision on it now, I could go with we can raise the cap this time. But we need we need a good justifiable reason to raise it again if it comes to that.
Dan, you are the one with the extraneous noise. If you could stay muted and listen.
I'm not sure what's.
I think it's the phone number that ends in 68. Could it be that one, or am I confused?
It goes away when Dan mutes.
Oh, it does. Okay.
Oh no, it sometimes rotates though.
You're muted, Dan.
Now you're muted that way. You went away.
I'm wondering if it's picking up the water in the nursery. Like it's grabbing that sound because I'm sitting here as quiet as I can be.
It sounds like a ticker tape.
Okay. Is it going right now?
Nope.
No, not right now.
The water turned off though at the same time. Yeah, it's funny. It has been dry here in central Vermont, considering how much rain we've had in many other places. And so the irrigation is running somewhat frequently. So,
Hillary, I am wondering if I'm hearing that we don't fully have a really clear scope of work for this work. So instead of getting like what you might just call a scoping or a feasibility assessment, we're actually getting into the realm of, I don't know, some level of design. And is that true? And do you think that we could really tighten up the scopes of work so that these overages aren't happening? Or is the process of running things through the FFI tool so not understood at this early stage and using that tool that consultants are having a hard time knowing what they're getting into?
I don't know. A lot of these were gullies, and I'm not sure the methodology that they used. That was one of the questions DEC had, was like, as we move, if these projects move forward, Ben Copans with DEC wanted to talk about what methodology had been used. There is not an official one, it sounds like, for DEC for phosphorus reduction of gullies at this point. So I don't know. I mean, I think we were clear in what we were asking for. What I don't know is that maybe to get to those answers, they felt they had to do this level of work anyhow. And so then they documented it for us in these nice, handouts, nice reports. I'm not sure. It is project development. We had to use those deliverables and milestones from the QIP funding table because that's what we have to do for this grant. So it is a standard project category. We could ask other groups what they generally pay for project development per project, like WUV and the districts do this too. I think the RPCs do this too.
Yeah, I think it'd be a good thing to compare to other places. If everybody's going over and just to produce the very bare bones initial project, basically discovery, then yeah, we need to bump it up a little bit, but I'd be very cautious about giving it just a time and materials without some sort of not to exceed on it.
Sure. Yeah, and we're happy to have a not to exceed if the group agreed on what that was. So we can come back with more information and we can bid out. If we have anything go to bid between now and the next meeting, we can just use the old number,
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Hillary, really quickly, do you need approval from us to pay the overages that have already occurred before we move forward?
We
No.
would if we were gonna, oh, sorry. gonna pay them, but you don't have to. But in order for us to pay them, you would have to approve it, or you can not approve it.
And we'd have to change their contracts.
Which we would do because that's
Okay.
an administrative task. So I guess if anyone wants to approve or disapprove. I mean, we could put it on hold until we figure out a cap, because if there was a new cap, say it went to 2,500, we could pay them the extra 2,000. Like if that happens at a later meeting.
Yeah, let's say, well, you guys can do a little fact finding with the contractors, with the consultants, and we can make a call from there.
Okay.
So
do we need a motion to say that?
I was gonna say, I don't think we need a motion on that one, since it's just kind of pushing it off to decide next time. So we can move on to the Lake Basin Association OEP budget increase.
Well, is next, when we say push it off to next time, are we referring to pushing it off till December?
Most likely.
So would that mean these consultants, though, can't get paid until then? Or would we
Well,
pay, can we pay the initial amount that we expected?
They haven't been, sorry. They've been paid for the work that was outlined in their contracts and the amounts that were outlined in their contracts.
Okay.
So, and they agreed to that up to, $1,500 per project for that. So I think we're okay there. And we can get back to them that, we're still discussing, what the appropriate amounts should be.
Yeah. And I think it's probably a good idea just to let them know that it's not necessarily tied to their individual work effort or satisfaction overall, or dissatisfaction with their work effort, more along the lines of we just need to understand what and why, so that we are properly addressing it going forward.
Yeah, that sounds good.
The water's going again, Dan.
There's nothing going on here. Yeah. No, there's no water going on. I'm not, nothing. Tight.
Great. So we good? The early stage fund budget?
Yeah, I think we're ready for OEP.
Great.
So we've got, basically, we, after the fact, after you approve this project and after we did a contract with the consultant, we were asked by several lakes in the area that are part of the Lake Basin watershed if they can be included. And we thought that was a great idea. Those would be Glen and Echo Lakes and BB Pond. And so with that information, the consultant, and we have a representative from the consultant group here. We have, of course, Rob and Joanne from the lake. So the initial, what you approved was a multi-year LWAP for $21,515. The consultant is now asking for $56,503 to be able to add those 3 smaller lakes in.
Well, and they're increasing the amount of assessment they're doing and the project deliverables significantly. And Allison Marchione reviewed what the consultant submitted to the LBA, and she said that this is the biggest lake watershed action plan that's been done in the state of Vermont. It's the biggest lake watershed, inland lake watershed in the state of Vermont, and that we had probably significantly under budgeted that project initially. She said the average is 35,000 for a watershed action plan, and that the DEC, I guess, bid out another lake that was larger, another one of the larger lakes in Vermont, but smaller than this lake watershed, and it was 50 or 55,000 for that action plan. So she thought that the price increase actually matched the land area that the consultant would be looking at, and that the deliverables sort of matched what the state expected in terms of the dollars per project identified and the conceptual designs. She did
But
have
she
a request
also,
for change.
she
Yeah,
also, sorry, Hillary.
she did have a request for a change, though, that the consultant had wanted to make sure, and I empathize with this, like wanted to make sure that each of these smaller lake associations, BB, Echo, and who am I forgetting?
Glenn.
Yeah, so BB and Echo have the lake associations. That's why I forgot Glenn. But that each of these would have projects associated with them so that the lake associations and the residents in those areas could work on projects too. But Allison preferred that we just used an overall prioritization methodology so that we could have the highest, the most efficient projects ranked the highest. So I guess I'll let Frank and or Rob chime in if they'd like to.
Yeah, so
Go ahead, Frank.
Yeah, so the thought there with separating things by lake was we wanted to leave that kind of open-ended to make sure that it was a useful product for all of the different stakeholders that are coming into this now with 4 different lakes, and that change from Allison's perspective of keeping everything in one prioritization method, I think makes total sense. And we can still include what were the best projects from each of those sub watersheds, but it'll all be scored against each other for every project that we identify through the LWAP. That's a simple change for us on our end with this amendment. I think another thing that we talked about in the amendment was ensuring that at least one concept design was completed for each of the smaller lakes. And the amendment does include 3 additional concept designs versus the original contract. So that's something that maybe we would want to discuss with Allison if she agreed with that, or maybe given that she wants to prioritize based on overall phosphorus efficiency, we would want to kind of ignore where the 8 best projects show up and just do concepts for the 8 selected projects, whether or not they're in those sub watersheds.
Hi, this is Jan. I wondered if I could ask my question now.
I just feel like we should give Rob a chance to talk. He's got his hand up.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I can't see myself, so I don't know. I can't.
I can
my
see you now
camera's
for the
even not
first
working.
time, Rob.
Okay. I've met with representatives from the BB Pond and Echo Lake Homeowners Association. There is no homeowner association for Glen Lake. However, I've met with homeowners from there, so they're all aware of the project and are very interested in seeing some results. Go ahead, Jan.
Oh, sorry. My question sort of is about stakeholders and also at Echo and BB. I'm a Hubbardton resident, and I'm also on the Lake Bombazine Environmental Alliance, but it was my understanding like that stakeholders would be a little bit broader, defined more broadly than just the homeowners. So that was just a comment. And then the question I have is really if I kind of see it as a unified thing, a watershed. And so the waters from Echo go into BB, and then from there, enter into Austin Pond and Roach Pond. And I don't know if Austin and Roach being classified as ponds rather than lakes means that they're not on the table for this. But I mean, I know that Austin Pond, for example, has a lot of problems right now. I don't live on Austin Pond. In fact, I'm not in the Basin watershed. I'm a little too far west. But I'm frustrated by this, like that it seems like it's not the whole picture for Hubbardton. I'm going to see if I can be on our planning board so that we can look more comprehensively. But I guess my question then is, so what happens with problems that are like in between Lake BB and the north end of Lake Bomazene?
So I can address that.
Go ahead, Frank.
So any problems within the greater Bomazene watershed that we are clued into while working on the watershed action plan would be fair game to include in this plan. You know, before this amendment, we would still have been looking at roads that are in the sub-watersheds of these three smaller lakes. The amendment is more aimed to add additional focus to those smaller lakes specifically. But any problem area within the greater Lake Bomazene watershed we would want to include that in this plan.
But how does one enter into that? I just feel like I apologize because I felt like I was knew about the process, but I clearly didn't because I missed a bunch, and I don't know how one enters into that conversation.
Well, I could pass along my information to you. If you know of problem areas, we would love to hear about them as we're working on this. So.
Okay.
And there'll be a stakeholder meeting coming up too. I don't know, Frank and Rob, if there's a sense of like when that stakeholder meeting would be held, but I'm sure it's coming up soon.
We haven't scheduled it yet, but we will. Frank and I are talking about it. Right now. We're waiting for this decision so that we could discuss the total project scope.
So that would be like Rob or Frank could let somebody know from the Alliance or somehow that, as a Hubbardton resident, that's where I'm, partially coming from. Just trying to make sure that Hubbardton has a very small, town management. And I think things like get missed sometimes, not intentionally at all, but just because there's so few people.
We will certainly reach out to you, Jan. No question.
Okay. Thank you.
I'll also put my email address in the chat of this meeting. So if you or anyone else wants to reach out to me about this, that's a good way to reach me.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Hillary, this is Katie. I see Dan has a question, but I'm willing to make a motion to approve the extension of funds if we're at that point.
Yeah, I had a question about including Glen. Glen is like 98% state-owned land. If I'm looking at the properties around there, there's very few individual stakeholders on that lake. And as far as my experience on Glen is that it's in really good shape. And so if we're going to include Glen, I don't know if we want to include it, like, trying to find a specific project on it. I think that access to the lake is extremely limited in terms of construction or repair if needed. So I'm just wondering what is the benefit of including Glen and trying to identify projects on it. I think we'd be struggling.
Frank, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, so I've not gone and explored Glen Lake all too much. These three lakes were identified kind of through conversations with Rob, and I think some of the stakeholders who either live or recreate on each of them. So, you know, construction access may be difficult for many of the parts of Glen Lake, but if I remember correctly, there is one of those state park boat launches on Glen Lake, as well as some other access, roads within the watershed. So I think there are definitely potential areas for projects within the Glen Lake watershed. The shoreline projects may be less accessible for that one. And Rob, feel free if from your conversation.
Yeah, well, the only conversation that I had with the homeowners that I know is that there are too many geese. So that was that. I told him I didn't think we were going to be able to do anything about the geese, but that was his complaint. So I agree. I think that Glen Lake is pretty pristine, and with so few houses, there are probably less potential issues. However, it directly feeds into Lake Basin, so it's clearly right smack in the middle of the watershed. So I think at least we should be looking at it. The only tour we've done so far is of the lower part of Lake Basin. So part of what I'd like to see happen is, after this is approved, we can sort of hit the ground running now and do before the winter, do a quick tour of the different areas.
Yeah, I think actually I'm okay with doing a tour, but I think just maybe the wording of trying to find projects on Glen.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah.
Was concerning to me, thinking that the overall condition of that lake is remarkable. So.
Yeah. We've also met with a group called Friends Up North, which who consider themselves north of the float bridge a separate entity almost. And so there are a lot of issues there that we think we need to look at as well. So that having an expansion of the scope of the project will allow us to focus some more attention on that area as well. And Jan, that's
Right.
mostly Hubbardton, right?
Yeah, mostly.
Okay. Right. So we still have Katie's motion on the table. If anyone would like to second or to propose a different motion?
I'll second Katie's motion, Aaron.
Great, thank you.
Is that Shane?
Yep.
Yes, that's Shane.
Okay.
So all in favor, aye or raise hand.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstain? Thank you all. That'll move forward then. To the 56,503. And that moves us up to the Kelly projects update.
Okay.
You want
I
the
think we have
slides to look?
Yeah, we have a slide for that. So a lot of these projects, all of these projects are from I'm just double checking this, are from this fund we've just been talking about, the Project Development Fund. And oops, not that slide though.
Oops.
Is it that slide? That slide, yeah, there we go. So this has been a little bit of a struggle. The phosphorus reduction so these are the projects that are on hold right now. The phosphorus reduction is 133 kilograms, expensive price tag, but it costs out to about $14,000 a kilogram, which is, that almost meets our target. It's very close to meeting our target, which is challenging to meet, as you know. but these projects are on hold for different reasons. One of the main reasons for the gullies being on hold is that DEC doesn't have the methodology available to sort of justify these phosphorus reduction numbers. So they're worried that when they develop the methodology, the numbers might differ a little bit from what we have from the different consultants that we used. The Rivers program has not approved of some of these gully projects. Deal with also with very, 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 very tiny, small streams way up in the headwaters. Some are, one or two of them are blue line streams, some of them, so mapped streams, a couple of them aren't. They're more like drainage, grass waterways in farm fields that have turned into highly quickly eroding ditches. So we're trying to work through this process with DEC to figure out. Sometimes I think, for example, with the Rivers program, like there's this idea that we need to treat the issue farther up in the watershed and not where the water sort of comes together to create these gullies. It's challenging. In one case, in one of the Addison County gullies, the northern gully, there is a agricultural issue that I think could be treated. There could be some exclusion fencing and a buffer, but in the other areas, it's permanent, it's perennial vegetation in the ag fields, they're flat. The watershed that drains to the ag field is mostly forested with some very low density development. The ag fields are it's a pretty low intensity of farming. The pollet, for example, those two pollet gullies have a lot of have a lot of that land use, the low density development, the forest, and then the ag is all, it's some ag fields that a farmer basically has retained after the farm was sold, and they grow hay on it, they bale it for horse owners, and they don't spread any manure up there. They use a small amount of nitrogen. So it's all very kind of low intensity land use. So my question back to them, I think, would be, these places where the water comes together and where we actually could have a treatment practice and where we have willing landowners might actually be a benefit. I'm not sure how we would chase down all this stormwater in these upper upland areas where we don't have permission from landowners and where we're not seeing obvious poor practices that are creating these gullies. It might just be a response of a slight land use change combined with climate change, and we're getting these gullies, which are creating a big phosphorus load. So that's where we are on these projects. We just wanted to keep you updated, and I don't know if any of you have had similar issues, but I think if a group, whoever is having these issues, as we try to get projects approved, just so we know about the projects each other's working on and can work together with DEC. That is our update.
Yeah. And just a reminder, that is why Angie Allen said at our last meeting that these projects were not eligible. But the group decided to push the issue, and we're not making much headway with DEC, but we're trying to salvage what we can out of these much needed areas.
Yeah, and it may be that the progress is slow too. I think they hear us. The one Lake Champlain direct gullies. Sorry, I'm just making sure I have the right ones here. No. Okay, the top group, the ones to Mudbrook. We were at a meeting with DEC and said, I had just told the farmer was like, I'm just going to do this by myself. I can't, this is crazy. So I told DEC that, like, hey, we could have spent a couple $1,000s and gotten, 41 kilograms of phosphorus reduction. And instead, because of the way that your policies read, we aren't going to, we identified the project and we helped identify how to fix it, but we aren't going to get any credit. And they were saying, well, maybe we could do something like, if it's under a certain price, you can go ahead with it, understanding that your phosphorus reduction might eventually be, increased or decreased when we get the formulas all in place. So I felt like that was a little bit positive, that part of the selling of this program to the legislature was that it was going to be flexible and that we were going to have some local control. And that would be a way that we could have a little bit of local control, and it would include some flexibility, which has been missing to date.
It's really hard.
Mike, you have your hand up?
Has the QUIS petitioned DEC to develop phosphorus reduction standards for gullies? Because you have that ability and DEC has to respond within 30 days.
We've been talking about it, Mike. We mentioned it to them and they implied that we wouldn't be very nice team players if we forced their hand like that. So we hadn't done it yet, but the subject has come up.
You would still be stuck because it's not eligible through the QUIP policy, but it is a way to remind, I mean, there, you have standards. You don't always have to play by the team rules.
Shane, you've got your hand up?
Yeah, I just, I mean, I think I can understand DEC's perspective on some of these gully projects. I mean, just getting a little bit more technical. Like sometimes you step into these gully projects and it's like there's no way that we can repair these things, stabilize these things. The geology is such that it's so easily eroded and structures are undermined. Crushed rock is undermined by flow. Even if you put fabric down, sometimes it's undermined by flow, or flow gets underneath it. And I understand that they, you know, why they really want to address the routing of the overland flow coming into the tops, the heads of these gullies. So I just want to ask Hillary, like, you look at these farm fields, are you seeing a routing of the surface flow that's, you know, directing everything to these gullies? Is there a lack of, and is there potential to create topographic or other structural roughness in these fields that would divert the water away, and really, you know, addressing this from that perspective? Because, man, I've been in some of these gullies and I've talked to, you know, a number of practitioners about these things, and you know, I've spent enough time with surficial geologists to really see how difficult it is to stabilize these things once they start going. If you can't shut the water off, you really have to shut the water off.
Yeah, so that's, and I'm glad you brought that up, Shane. So one of these gullies, the third one down, so the second white clump there, so it's one field. Some of the water drains through the center of the field, which is where the gully is. Some water comes down from the road and splits between that gully and a really small little tributary that runs along the edge of the field. The topography is very flat, so the water kind of chooses which way it goes from the inside the field. And one of the ideas from one of our consultants was to just route everything out of the gully, like don't put any more water in the gully, route the whole flat area and all the water coming down from the road instead of having it split. Just route it to that little stream and maybe put some grade controls in the stream to make sure that stays stable. So I was very excited because I thought, oh my gosh, this gully it's huge. It's going to be impossible to stabilize and you can't fill it back in. But then the rivers program said that would be a cross basin flow, and they didn't approve of that. So it's been really challenging to get these through the different groups. And but
Yeah,
I don't know. Sorry.
I was just gonna say that particular gully is like 20 feet deep. So imagine the phosphorus there, but yes, the challenges of finding the right practice to make it.
Yeah,
it's hard.
Solve the problem.
Yeah.
Restoring these. Go ahead.
I was going to say with the alternates, just leaving it, doing what it's doing now, and it's eroded through a whole field, which is now fallow, and the district's planted trees, as many trees as they can around it, but it's headed into the next farm field, which is also flat, and, you know, similarly and it's funny because I talked to Agency of Ag and they were saying, you know, a farmer could ditch this and create that same cross basin flow because the basin is a half a field away, and that would be legal. And so I don't know if this is, I guess I don't know about this cross basin flow, like how much of a roadblock this is or not. Right now it's, you know, this project's on hold for multiple reasons, and that's one of them. And
Hillary, this kind of gets at former conversation. I I mean, who's advocating for this project right now? Who's other than the QUISP? Is this a QUISP driven?
Yeah, the landowner came to us, so the
Yeah.
QUISP would be managing this project.
So it's just, it's interesting to me. I mean, and the conversation about the increase of the cap on the project development fund. I mean, these seem to be, well, I don't know, I'm conflating things a little bit, but just the lack of project proponents to drive these conversations, I don't know, seems to be an issue.
Well, and you
but-
can see too, like each of these projects really ended up being, you know, they're 4 projects or 2 projects. They didn't end up being 1 project each either when they were said and done.
Yeah.
So Hillary, we don't really have an ask of the WIC, do
No.
we? We just want to bring this to their attention.
Yeah. It's something that's really affecting the outcome of our work and our ability to, I mean, it feels like it's affecting the ability to meet our targets and spend our funding and do what we're supposed to be doing. So we just wanted to bring to your attention, we have been identifying projects. They have been, you know, meeting at least parts of our contract and our target. We're having trouble moving them forward. We just wanted you to be aware of where we were with some of these projects.
And we'll keep you informed.
Yep. And now we have another big topic.
The project adoption discussion.
Yes. So we're excited. We would love to adopt some projects. I just recently did my O&M, my operations and maintenance training. And it sounded like the order of operations was to review projects with the BWQC, get approval to adopt them, do project verification to see what, if anything, needed to be done out there, and then if there was any maintenance that needed to be done, sort of move through that process. So the ones that we wanted to bring up today are, we have 3 projects to talk about today. The first is the Poultney High School rain gardens. These were installed about 10 years ago. They treat the runoff from the school roof, from the parking lot. It all goes into, so the treated runoff then goes through their rain gardens with under drains that go into the storm drain system. That storm drain goes through the Poultney Town Garage, which also has a project designed but not implemented yet, and then go to the Poultney River. So it's about 0.5 kilogram per year of phosphorus, which isn't a ton, but the rain gardens are, if we go to the next slide, you'll see the rain gardens are very overgrown and unsightly, and the district and the high school have been trying to maintain these over the years, but they really need, the bottom right-hand picture is the rain gardens when they were first installed, all neat and tidy. And then the other pictures are what's happened since. So the district and the high school have been kind of paying for this, for some maintenance, or just doing the maintenance ourselves over the years, but it sort of needs an overhaul. The top right picture is actually where the curb has a curb cut. Sorry, I need to plug in my computer. Where there's a curb cut for water to get in from the parking lot, which is how the water's routed to these rain gardens, but you can see it's filled up, sediments built up there. So those plants, you know, those are weeds, they need to be removed, and those entrances made sure that water can get in there. So this is right at the entrance to Poultney. It just felt like politically this would be a nice one to get to adopt. It's highly visible. It's a great example garden. It has a little informational sign there. It'd be really nice to get it sort of, adopted and involve students and whatever, but get it taken care of. And it shouldn't be super expensive to get this cleaned up a little bit. So that's the first one. The second one is on Ferncliff Road. It's on Lake St. Catherine. It treats about a little over 4.5 acres of upland watershed, including a road, actually a big turnaround, and an area where the town turns around some of their equipment. The estimate we have, there's So this estimate is in a range because the current calculator brings up 0.76 kilogram, and the old stormwater master plan had 0.2 kilograms listed. So we need to figure out where in that range this project falls. But this project needs a little bit of rehab too. It's on private property, and that we have another 12 projects going into design around Lake St. Catherine. So having good landowner relations with one of these landowners we only have 2 landowners who have these projects installed on their private property. So this project, if we go to the pictures, is doing a great job. So the top right is when it was first installed, and the bottom 2 are current pictures. So it's still, I don't think they have a problem with the way it looks. It's a little weedy, but I'm not sure they mind that. But it got with the last 2 really heavy, the summers with heavy rain, we've gotten kind of a deluge of sediments in there. So we need to clean out those basins. There's 2 little basins. They need to be cleaned out and some new sand put in. So again, not a super expensive project, but great for homeowner relations. This is visible from the road. People can look and see how this is like a nice little project. It divides the 2 properties. The homeowner generally likes it and is positive about it, but wanted a little maintenance done. So it just seemed like a good one to adopt, since I'd like to adopt all projects, but since it needed a little maintenance anyhow. And then the last one is a buffer planting. So this one really has the phosphorus credit that we'd be looking for. The buffer's doing fairly well. It could use a couple little replants in spots, but it felt like it would be really nice to have a buffer project in our sort of quiver of projects, because it's one of the better ones in terms of phosphorus reduction, not being super expensive. It'd just be nice to have one so we could go through all the steps with the landowner, and some of this is a little bit of a learning experience as we move forward. So the thought was that these 3 projects are small and manageable and not going to be that expensive to do maintenance on. They're nice projects. The landowners all would like to partner with us. There's Lewis Brook. So it's actually doing pretty well. As pasture on one side, it has a crop field on the other side that rotates between hay and corn, and it has some pasture uphill. But anyhow, the landowners are all on board, so it just felt like a good way to get started. And we could do a little bit of maintenance hopefully this fall if we can fit all that in with the state timeline. We're still waiting on the verification app, which we need before we can do maintenance. So that's our proposal to you guys.
There's a pretty complex agreement that landowners need to sign off on. So whenever we get some willing ones, we like to take advantage of those situations. Well,
do you have a budget for how
mind-
much?
Go ahead.
Do you have a budget for how much it would cost to adopt them?
I don't think it would cost anything to adopt them. We do, our next bullet item is O&M Project Maintenance Fund, which may be irrespective of it would include these, but also we have Sugar House, which would be also included in that group, because that's one that is part of our normal group of our only project that's implemented.
so yeah, Mike, we were thinking of setting up another fund, similar to the early stage project development fund, but have an amount of money set aside so that since this is in the early stages, staff will probably be doing the work of the O&M. So we would have that fund just readily available.
I think Barbara's saying staff would do the verification step. I'm not planning to drive an excavator at Fort Cliff.
I always wanted to.
But so your staff would be doing the verification. Would they also be doing for the planting and things like that? Like that kind of maintenance, or would that be again is that a separate fund to actually do the maintenance versus the verification?
So it's all a process, and we may be conjoining a bunch of things together here in this conversation. So there's project verification, there's project maintenance. They all have steps that need to happen. We have an RFQ out right now for project verifiers. So if anybody's interested, there's instructions, and Barbara can get you information about that. So yes, we can put some of this stuff out to bid, different things, but right now I feel like we should really just maybe talk about, do we want to, as you know, part of our job is to have new projects, and part of it's to make sure we're maintaining old projects. So this falls under that category of like, do we think these are good projects? And then we could move on to the fund maybe.
Hillary, can you, or maybe it's better discussed under the next item, but just the bigger picture around the O&M and the O&M fund, and like I'm forgetting a lot of this, but what I'm guessing is that an O&M fund would be available for any project that any new projects we would fund in the future, as well as any projects as these are that have been implemented in the past by other funding sources. Is it that simple?
Yeah. So for any project we all approve as a BWQ that goes to, that becomes implemented, that those projects are, we can spend maintenance funds on those. And then for projects we adopt, those then become part of our group of projects that we're responsible for. So we can spend maintenance funds on those. Our formula grant is one chunk of money, but it can be spent to do project development, project assessments. That's kind of one clump. Project design and implementation is sort of the other clump. And then operations and maintenance, really, the maintenance piece is the other clump. And it's not really divided specifically. It was left up to us as a group to figure out how we want to divide that main formula grant into these different categories, which is, one of the first things we did was the early stage project development fund. We took 30,000 and set that aside for project development, or just made it available so the QUISP could put these RFPs out. And this is sort of similar. We would be on the next bullet item asking for some amount of funds that we could use to pay for maintenance that results from the sort of state mandated processes that would lead up to that. Like, we're a ways away from that piece because we have to do the verification and any RFPs that are needed through the guidance or rule.
And is the verification step, and again, I'm forgetting a lot of what I've known in the past, so if there's an existing project, the verification finds that the project isn't functioning, there needs to be some O&M in order for the QUISP to receive the previously allotted nutrient reduction credits.
Yeah, but essentially, and there's an app, like a 123 survey app, and you go through and answer the questions, and then, the verifier would put in recommendations about what might need to happen. So
Conducting implementing the operations and maintenance, or the O&M, the maintenance really is required in order to accrue the phosphorus reduction credits associated with the project.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Required for the lifespan of that particular type of project too.
And what about these that we adopt, because there was no life, just for these that we adopt, the reduction numbers that you just showed us then would come to the QUISP as long as there was O&M being done?
Yeah, as long as they're functioning. So for the high school, we would need, for all of these, we would need to sign new agreements with the QUISP. But for the high school, the agreement has run out. There is no current agreement. And that project would get inspected, and then it would get sort of a new agreement / lifespan and come back onto the table.
So it seems like a pretty inexpensive way to get to accrue credits, because you're not actually implementing a new project. You're just maintaining an existing project.
Yeah, exactly. And also it protects these old projects where DEC and different entities, landowners have made investments, and there isn't that protection for them right now. There's no funding to help maintain them. People are doing it by themselves if they're doing it at all.
Okay, thanks.
Right. So is there a motion regarding the project adoption?
I'll make a motion to adopt those 3 projects.
3 or 4?
Hold on, was it Lewis?
3.
Brook? 3?
3.
Okay.
Was that Dan? Yeah. Yeah. So one of them, we had another planting project where the landowner came forward and really wanted some help with their project. And it's a good one too. And I think it's 14.65 kilograms I figured out. But it doesn't have a project number and I'm not sure why. So I have to get down to I have to figure that out. So we might be talking to you about that one at the next meeting.
Hillary, is that this one? The York Street?
No, that one's, okay, so that's a whole other thing. That's a really big project. That one's going to come up probably at some point too. So we need to talk to Paul about that. But that's our best project in the whole watershed in terms of phosphorus reduction. Right now, that would put us like way over our limit for adoption kilograms. But that one's on there because it's on my radar. That's all. That's just an extra slide. It's a little preview of maybe something to come.
Good things to come.
Right.
Hillary, you just said over our limit on adoption kilograms. Can you explain that, just so I don't misunderstand?
Dear, Shane.
No, never mind.
Did I say that? Shoot. No, so I don't know. There's some discussion about, it hasn't been set, I don't think yet, but the state, they don't want us to go and adopt that project for 47 kilograms and then say, well, we don't have to implement any projects now because, we met our limit. That's about half our limit right there.
Okay.
So that's why they're kind of throwing around like they could set a limit, and it goes up every year. So it's cumulative. So right now we have 78 kilograms a year, but so it's 78 this year, it's 150, whatever, 6 next year. So I feel like the ones we have on the table are a reasonable amount, and DEC can cap us this year if they want to, but they would then accept the rest of the kilograms next year. So I think it's reasonable.
Just to enable, I think in order to enable further conversation, I'll second that motion.
Excellent. All in favor, raise your hand or say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Any abstained?
So
Great.
moving forward, Hillary and Barbara, I'd recommend developing a policy so that for adoption of projects, so that you don't have to bring every individual one to us, and we can just approve a fund and then you would implement the policy to bring things forward.
Okay. I love all my projects though, and we have a lot in the area, so I don't know if you guys want to restrain me a little bit.
You can disregard my advice.
I like it though. Mike, I was thinking we should have a set of questions and say, is this project a yes for these questions that meet our goals? And so maybe next time we'll bring to you, like you're saying, a framework or something that we could use to help guide us.
Yeah, because the BWQ would have to approve any policy that you were going to use, but it might streamline the process and allow you to adopt stuff in between meetings as well.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds
Okay.
good.
Yeah.
And Hillary, you may have said this already, but the timeline for these projects that we adopt will start when we technically adopt them. Is that true? It would kind of reset the timeline.
It does, and I think the next thing we need to do is get new agreements with landowners, because we can't really do much till we get those agreements. And then we're waiting for the verification software, I guess, to be available, that program, because we would love to get a little maintenance completed on these this fall. It would make a lot of people very happy, I think, to get these cleaned up.
Okay, thanks for clarifying.
Great, which moves us into the O&M fund to coordinate this maintenance.
Well, and to do the maintenance, that's why we struck struck that off. A lot of this coordination will actually be from our admin, normal admin funding. Yeah, so whatever you guys think is reasonable. You know, when you think about like 10%, if we're getting 10% of our credits, you know, 10% is 97,000. I don't think we would need more than like 20 would be high. We've been doing the high school work on $1,000 to $2,000 a year, even when we hire people to do it. So I don't know what you guys, how you want to, again, it's just a limit. It's a upper limit within which we can contract people to do this work after we follow the correct protocols and procurement.
I mean, if you think that 20,000 is actually a reasonable budget, is that just for this year or for all years moving forward? Because as we theoretically add more implementation projects, that really should go up.
Yeah, that would just be for this year.
Yeah.
Yeah, we look at it every year.
Yeah, so we revise and update the number with each fiscal year.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we're still working on FY23 dollars too, just so you know, and you'll see at the end how much we've spent, but it's not very much of it. So it's not like we're burning through money here or anything as it was.
It's more just in the anticipation of if we start to get a lot of implementation projects and then all of a sudden our O&M is like way higher. I don't want to like make a problem for ourselves later that we don't need to.
Yes, I agree.
We can go with the up to 10%, and if we spend below that, super. But if we eventually move up to that, actually spending that 10%, we're kind of covering our bases now. Anybody want to make a motion? I can make a motion to fund to create an O&M fund up to 10% yearly.
I'll second. Sorry, Mike.
All right. All in favor? Aye, raise hands.
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstain? All right, that will pass. So next up is the verifier RFQ distribution.
Yes, this is that component where we hire folks to make sure that the projects are still working. And there's a certification process. We have an RFQ out. We've had it out since August. It'll be kept open on a rolling basis. Not a whole lot of interest yet. I think firms are still getting certified, and we're still waiting for some of the software and some of the programs that will be needed for the verification process as well. So that's more of an update than anything else.
Have we had any applications?
Not yet.
Okay. All right, thank you for the update then. And our next meeting in December.
Yeah, and we have this is gonna be hard to read, one more table with all what we've done, what the WIC has done so far.
Okay.
So the amount of projects approved, and this includes the gullies that we talked about earlier. So it's on the high side, is 246.6 thousand. We now have 3 years of funding that are in the bank. We're still working on the first year. That total was 831,000. So we've got a ways to go just to use up the first year. Say nothing of the other 2 years that are there to be used as well. And the phosphorus reduction, that's going to be there's a number of projects to be determined. So went on the low side with the gullies, and then there's no number to put in for a number of these, like the lake the LWAP, Lake Bombazine. So we've got total right now, a low ball total of 290 kilograms per year. Our target is about 78 per year.
And the gullies, we probably at this point have to subtract out just because they're indefinitely on hold. So there's a couple of those numbers that might come out.
No, that's good enough.
Yeah, they're clumped together. So it's it starts under Castleton Village School, which is the narrow one. So Westlake Road, Route 22A, and Scotch Hill Road. Those three are the ones that would be, they're just indefinitely like on hold right now. So we're, hoping that we can move forward eventually with the projects, but if we can't, then we'll keep, we're going to keep looking for new projects anyhow.
So that takes it down to about 180.
Yeah, I think it was 176, something like that.
76. And the target is 78 per year?
Per year, and of course these won't all come, these are with this funding year, but it's it's all supposed to be happening on a calendar year, and we're
Right.
stretched past that, so I don't know how that's all going to work. Like, I think we're accruing kilograms as we speak.
Right. Exponentially, probably.
And do we have a dollar per kilogram number?
I think it was I just have the goalies, which were the 14,000. I don't know if that, well, you could do the math, I guess. But this is, I don't know if this is accurate, because one of those gullies was like $1 million. So I'm not sure. Oh, these are, sorry. So this, sorry, I understand. Sorry. This amount approved was like for conceptual designs, and it's not for the whole project amount. The other table, I think, had the whole project amount. So that was that gully, like that at least had for the gullies, the whole project amount. We don't know the whole project cost for a lot of these because they're so early yet, so soon, and they're like, we don't have that data quite yet for some of these.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just an update, but I think now we can, if there's no more questions, move on to next meeting, which
Okay.
I don't know if it's my turn to talk right now. I keep talking. So December would be a great time to have a meeting. We do have 2 projects in Castleton that are both final design. Sorry, I just want to make sure I guess one's conceptual design and one's final design. Both of those contractors are trying to get that work done so that it could come into the next quick meeting round. So I don't know if it would be prudent to set a December date, like later in the month. They're trying to get the projects done by the first week in December, or if we have a backup date in January, but that's those 2 projects. Mike at the town of Castleton is hoping they can come into the next quick meeting. The next application round, which is then we would review them at the meeting.
Any preferences, December or January? Okay, well,
Week of December 16th is still open for me.
I feel like it's either going to be the first 2 weeks of December or probably not again until early January. So
I'll send out some dates.
yeah.
I'm fine in the beginning of December. in the first 2 weeks.
Yeah, as am I.
And the 16th is a Monday, and it's the first Monday, and so it'd be the first day in the third week, so it's pretty close to that. So if that's a date we should include as potential. Are folks good with the 16th?
Yeah. 16 works. Yeah.
Yes. I could do that, especially in the afternoon. It's better for me, but it doesn't matter. I can shift things around.
16th, I have a conflict at 2 p.m., 2 to 3. Other than that, I'm free.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, we usually meet at 3 or 3:30, so that should be okay, Mike. We've been going for an hour and 50 minutes.
All right. Well then, any other questions, concerns, comments? And we can adjourn at 5:05 p.m.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks all. We'll see you later.
Thanks. It was fun to have public here
Thanks, public.
for the LWAP.
Oops, in the back of the room.
Thank you for approving the funds.
Yeah, I'm glad that worked out, Rob.
Me too. Okay, have a nice evening.